Hey, Roy Moya, welcome to the Ultimate QA podcast. Super glad to have you. How are you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Glad to connect with you. I know you were recently on vacation in Destin, Florida. How was that?
It was good. It was fun. We had we'd been like around the area, like we've been in like Pensacola, even like Miami and all that stuff. But like, my son and his friends, they all decided, hey man, let's go to Destin. So we were like in this area called like around Seaside. So it's like a nice calm little beach town area. It's funny, that's kind of like that's where they filmed the Truman.
Oh, what?
So like the little neighborhood that he was in, like so we were walking down the thing and it says like the Truman House and you go in there and it's like really you wouldn't expect it but it's like a real small little little kind of like a village looking thing and then you so yeah it kind of cool. So then we watched the movie again. We're like, oh yeah, that does kind of look like that. So
Oh, that's super cool.
yeah, it was a good
Yeah,
spot.
yeah, I had no idea that they filmed the Truman Show there, and also I had no idea where Destin, Florida is in general. After our last conversation, I googled it and checked it out. It's a beautiful little town and area surrounded by water. And to my surprise, 10.5 hour drive from Miami, which shocked me. I knew Miami was big. I knew Florida was big, but I guess I've only driven up and down the East Coast and even to as
Mhm.
far as like Tampa, which Tampa is, I think, is like 5 hours away, 4.5, 5 hours, but 10.5
Yeah.
hours, man, that's a long drive across one state.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like Florida is like Italy too, right? Because they're long and narrow, so it's like, you drive a long way, and it's just like one road. So, but yeah, and then for us, like I'm in Texas, so for us it was like from like I'm around the Austin area, from Austin to Destin's like 11 hours.
Wow. And did you guys drive it?
Yeah, yeah, we drove it. Man, all the stuff that's happening with the planes and everything, I was like, you know what, man, as a QA guy, I always think of the worst case
Yeah.
scenario all the time. So I was like,
Yeah.
man, let's hold off until they figure out what's going on with all these issues, these near misses that they're having. So
Yeah. You're talking about the Boeing things, the Boeing issues.
yeah, like Boeing issues. Like, I mean, it was more prevalent before, like a couple months ago, where it was like another airline, a plane flipped over. There was one where the plane was landing and then it lost the wing and it like completely flipped over. I mean, there was one where the tire fell off. I mean, man, it's like that you never really hear about them, and then all of a sudden it's like, all at once everything starts coming down.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because I love to travel.
Yeah.
We're always flying, so.
Yeah. That's actually pretty smart. Yeah, because these are weird and random issues. Do you think they are related to like poor quality assurance practices?
100%. 100% think that, man, because that's the thing is, especially like, so like we're like in the software industry or whatever, but there's QA in like mechanical engineering, aerospace and all that stuff. And I think I call them like the showtime guys, like your developers, your engineers and all, the machinists, all those guys. That's what they pay attention to. Whereas QA is like, okay, let's just get it out the door, because anybody like a stakeholder can see is like, yes, it has 40 rivets there. A QA guy would be, okay, are they in the right place? Do they have, is it supposed to be 40? Should it be 50? And I mean, because that was the thing. Like, remember there was one incident where like a plug from the hull of the airplane like ripped off in mid-flight, and it turns out that it was like a rivet or something was missing there, like, but so it's like, yeah, that was like a huge like lapse in quality assurance. I think, like the Boeing CEO, like all these guys, whenever you're dealing with like life changing, life sustaining and life supporting issues, it's like you got to really really go hard on it and have like many, just the same way like when you're testing software, like you have many levels of it, right? And the same thing for anything else, for testing and assuring that anything is working. But I think the issue is, sometimes this is just my guess, right? Because I've been in shops where you have QC guys, quality checkers, and then even like in like for mechanics, for example, like so when I was in the military, you had to, people are assigned like a vehicle. Let's say you get a Humvee. And every day you do your PMCS, was like the pre-mission checks and services or whatever. So you would go and you'll be like, okay, tire pressure good. Just do these checks. So they call it like QC, like quality checks.
The checking. Okay.
Yeah, and I've been in places like in shops where you go somewhere and like I've taken over teams and they're like, yeah, I'm a QC guy. I'm a QC guy. It's like, so you're just checking things, right? You just check that this, instead of like engineering ways to like draw out defects. It's like you get specs, you get like a functional spec or you get a requirement from product or whatever, and then you just check, okay, I can click here, I can open this page and I can do that, instead of like really like engineering a way to like draw out defects and things like that. So it's like I think with the industry there, with like the aerospace industry, like I said, I don't have a huge amount of experience in like in that side, but if I'm looking at it as a QA guy, software guy, like I would be, that's kind of the things that I would look for. It's like making sure that they're not just checking, that they're actually engineering ways to like draw out incidences. The same way how I say, like as a QA guy, I always look for the worst case scenario, That's the same thing that should be that I think would be really beneficial in that space.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And to me, it's a very interesting dynamic because, like in software, for example, we're, at least in my experience, I've rarely worked on software that makes life or death decisions for people, right? It's mostly web software or maybe some kind of mobile applications where it can provide value, but it's rarely like a life or death kind of decision where, like in airplanes or aerospace or cars, those like bugs there can cost money, but also lives. And so there, the whole process needs to be a lot more rigorous and a lot more intensive. And an interesting thought there is like nowadays, right, that we're moving to more and more software. I mean, we see that even with like cars, like Tesla, for example, it's pretty much majority of it is software operated and it has very few mechanical parts, the bare minimum to make the car run. And so then if you have engineers writing the software and the software has bugs in it, those can lead to terrible disasters. And what happens if the government deems that the software being written by these engineers isn't up to standards? Then they can
Uh-huh.
start like maybe putting in mandates of how software should be coded and
Yeah.
which programming language we should use and what kind of tooling we should be using. And that would be like a terrible, terrible situation because now it's the government making decisions probably that they're not qualified to make because they don't have the expertise. And yes, maybe in this one case, the technology or whatever happened to fail, but that doesn't mean that's applicable in every case. And so I think it's an interesting thought there because it shows maybe the importance of number one being professional engineer and thinking about these cases that you talked about, like not only coding for the bare minimum but also thinking outside of the box and trying to avoid truly serious disasters.
Yeah, that's true. Like that's kind of like what I was thinking. Like if it came down to that, like that would be. I mean, there's a lot of things in the news that are happening, like with all the Doge stuff. They have like these. The government have. It's not. I don't think it's like a. It is a government agency, right? The Doge guys, like they come in and they'll set up these areas and they do kind of like audits and stuff, and it's just really it's like a group of developers that are writing queries. Like from what I saw, like they like one of them. This is funny 'cause I think we were talking about this the other day. Like one of them, like he cloned a repo or something. He did something where he was like he was uploading stuff to his GitHub account and it was like public and he could see all these things and they were just like writing queries and things like that instead of which is good. Like they can pull out a lot of information and help with efficiency, but like them having the context of what the information is for and how it's used and things like that. That I think that's something that's very important instead of just like, yes, hey, we found these things here and this is what was wrong or whatever. And that's kind of like where like whenever you're developing, like I know like they're coming in doing stuff, but like in developing software, just like you were saying, like when they were just coding, if someone's just coding for like the bare minimum, like not really thinking about downstream effects, especially because it's everybody's working on the same code base, right? So they're just, I'm just taking care of my module. Here's what I'm doing, and it works in isolation. But that's where like everything else comes in, like where we come in, have to like, I call it like walking the dog. I mean, you got to walk it all the different paths that it can go, So, but yeah, I think that's the thing is having with QA, it's good to have like content, like I think the QA person, and with everything that's happening now with AI and all this stuff, it's really good like having like a manual QA guy who's like the superpower user, right? That they have all the context because like they're taking in they're at the meetings with the stakeholders, they're talking to the product guys or the BIs or the BAs or whoever it is that they're pulling all their stuff from, and they the context, the good, like, okay, this is what it should be doing and this is why it should be doing it. But yeah, it's interesting how you say like you've never done anything with like life saving, or that was like dependent on life. But like I remember I've worked on like fintech stuff, and that's pretty close. I can tell you like there was like I was working in this company, and I don't want to like say anything, but like I don't want to give away any secret sauce or whatever, but there was an issue, and it was like I think it was like my second day there, like first or second day there, and I was still kind of like coming up in the QA world, and I get there and they're like, hey, we're doing a release, it's just in time, you can come see kind of like how everything is working, and then so the everything was pushed into production, and so far no life and death stuff, right? But then all of a sudden, the building we were in, like 2-story building or whatever, all of a sudden that we just hear this big thud, like someone like rolling down the stairs. And it was like this accountant lady's like, there's a bug in the system, and we're like, everybody's like, oh, okay, what's it about? And she's like, we're losing $6,000, it's like $60,000 every 10 minutes on this thing, because it was like it had to do with like predictive analytics, and we were kind of, there was like one number off or something, where it was like I said, I don't want to give away any of the stuff, but yeah, they were losing a lot of money, and I was like, that's where the life, like it was life and death, because she came down super hard on those stairs, man. It was so crazy. Yeah, like working with like fintech and accounting stuff, that's one of those things that's also, it's not life or death, but like it's life or death of that company, man. Like one wrong move, and you are, especially things that are like highly regulated, like banks and stuff like that, because you're kind of like beholden to like government oversight, right? So there's like tax laws and SEC, or was it Securities and Exchange Commission stuff that you have to worry about. So it's like you really, really want to do like testing on top of testing with testing before it goes out the gate. So it's like that's one of those things that's so crazy, and you want to really kind of watch out for that stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, go ahead, sorry.
such a beautiful point, Roy. I totally agree with you. It makes sense about fintech and finances in general, how they can be so significant, not only for the organization, but if they're touching end users, that can also negatively impact the end users. All right. So let me ask you, right? In your role, you have a lot of experience. You're head of QA engineering at your current organization. How would you structure a plan to mitigate disasters at like a fintech company? What would you do?
I think the best thing to do is first to sit down and pull data, right? Especially with like fintech stuff. There's so many numbers, so it's awesome for if you came from like the coding side of the house, like you're pulling in all these numbers, right? And creating kind of like a risk assessment, like risk matrix, where it's like how where are all the points of risk for any type of change, right? So this way you can have kind of like a traceability matrix. So let's say we were updating something like for fintech, like an interest rate, updating interest rate. Man, that's so tricky. It's very tricky, right? So updating interest rates, let's say like, or calculating interest rates, like daily compounding stuff like that. You really have to, if you're, let's say, you're doing an update, right? And you have your developers, and it's like a small change, we're changing like one number or whatever. You kind of really have to understand where does changing that rate like have that traceability matrix to see, okay, everywhere that this is changed, here are the points of contact. And then make sure that you do like, so I call it like risk-based testing. So you do your regular testing through the release, right? We're doing like iterative builds and iterative testing as things go along, and then your feature testing, which is testing all the features together. And then after that, then we do like regression testing, testing all the other stuff, that none of the downstream stuff, but really like focusing on those points of contact to make sure that none of those are changed or affected by that. So having like a good, I think a traceability matrix is super important, especially with fintech. Like you have to know, because I've worked at places before where you're doing like, you're calculating interest on things every day. And as new customers come in, and sometimes they'll leave and then come back. So it's very important to kind of really have that math down and really be able to understand how it's being calculated, where it's being calculated, and where that rate is affecting, because that rate can also affect other things, right? Like the principal amounts and things like that. It can affect so many things. You have to know all the points that it touches, because if you just miss one, and it could be calculating something different in another area the entire time, and no one would know about it. And that's the thing with those things, with some of these like fintechs and things like that, where you could really, right now, there's let's say there's apps like like a Nerd Wallet or E-Trade or whatever, that they're holding money and they're calculating things, right? There could be a bug in the system on how the interest is compounded, right? And it could be fractions of cents, like 0.00001 cent, but it could just be happening every single day, and nobody would really know about it until it becomes like a huge issue when like audits come in and things like that. So it's very important to really like understand where the data is now, what are the risk points, and what's going to happen after you make the change. So like having these kind of like these nets every single phase, so like a net to catch like any API error, calculation mathematical errors, touch point errors, anything that has downstream effects for those, like what else is working off of that field. So like having like all these little gates and areas that you can rely on before. I like to say that you want to spread as wide and cast out as wide a net possible to catch as much as you can. Like it's hard, right? Like you can't, as a QA guy, like you're not going to say we're going to catch 100% every time. It's very hard, because if you think about it, just if you had a field, if you had a username and password field with a button on it, you could, out of that, there's millions and millions of combinations you can make to test, right? Because it's not just those three things that you're talking about. It's the inputs. It's how they're different combinations of how they're interacted with. There's so many things. So it's like all of these things are like exponential. But if you cast a wide enough net with all the touch points and all the risk points, you can pretty much assure that you're going to catch a huge amount of the things before they go out, and make sure at least that no, I call it like showstoppers, no showstoppers will kind of affect that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you're basically talking about the idea. You're getting very like deep and analytical about the requirements and the, as you talked about, the traceability matrix to understand how the system operates. So that's a preventative type of testing approach, which is certainly one way to do it. There's another type of approach that I seem to lean towards is basically like we we test as much as we can based on like our understanding of the system. So maybe like the feature that you're talking about in terms of like calculating interest rates, there's got to be some kind of unit tests that are written against that to ensure you avoid any kind of mathematical calculation issues. If there's any interactions with APIs, you do those. Maybe there's some UI tests. Doesn't sound like there's a necessity for any types of UI tests in this kind of situation. But of course, we're just talking about something hypothetical, and so you do that. And as long as you have those automated tests in place and you can release a fix quickly enough, I don't have a huge issue with bugs as long as they're not showstoppers, as you mentioned, right? As long as they're not these critical type of things that even if they're out for 10, 15 minutes, significantly impact the business or people. Just release a fix, and then you figure out something happened. Okay, cool, let's release a fix, and then boom, it's fixed. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like how we all want to do business, right? Like we can, because at the same time, so I say we're talking an ideal situation, right? I have a a traceability matrix, risk analysis run on everything, but then in the end, they're like, it has to be out by Tuesday.
Yeah, right, right.
So at that point, you have to really like, let Jesus take the wheel. I just I just let
Oh,
it out.
Jesus.
I think that's right. That's kind of like what the same approach, right? Like you want to test, and that's why it's really important for automation. I'm super hardcore on automation because these things that happen, like you said, like we want to try to mitigate any type of showstoppers coming out. But let's say you release and there's an issue, right? It's like just a customer facing, something very small but not insignificant, right? But things like that, I'm okay with them as long as they just happen once, right? So that's why, like, let's say that does happen, we can add it to our regression suite, either manual or automation, and then like drive on so it doesn't happen again, right? So yeah, I think that's a good way to go, because if we try, like I said, we want to do our most diligent efforts, right? But also we can't sacrifice good enough for perfect, right? We got to make sure that we're moving, because as it is, QA is always the bottleneck, right? Everything, we're depending upon what kind of shop you run. You're running at 2 to 1 developers, sometimes 3 to 1. I mean, I've been like, when I've worked at startups where there was like, 8 developers and just me, so it's always going to be that we're the bottleneck. So we do want to, as you're doing, and that's kind of like where risk-based testing comes in, because instead of me having, let's say you're like a lone guy in your shop, right? And it's a startup, it's young, and everything is very dynamic, and you're pushing stuff out. You want to make sure that your time is as concentrated as possible, and your efforts are more as concentrated as possible. So you do that risk-based testing, right? Instead of me having to go and regress the entire thing, if I know that these things are the ones that are being touched. Let's say I'm doing sign up. Okay, we have a whole big app behind signed up, right? You have like purchasing or friending or whatever type of app it is, right? But if you're just making an update to like forgot password or sign up or anything like that, you want to concentrate all of your efforts around that area and any touch point, any downstream touch points there, so you're just focusing on what you know is going to be updated. But I mean, really, that again, that's an ideal too, because it's not. I doubt that you would have a release as just one thing, but in all these things that in your release, you would want to at least at the bare minimum do like feature testing on all the stuff that's being put out, and make sure that you're touching all those areas. And then when it goes out, let's say there are issues, there shouldn't be any really big, huge show-stopping issues.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You touched a little bit on automation. I want to transition to that topic a bit. So for us, like people hire me and my company to implement automated testing at their organizations, whether it's improve it or build an entire automation program from scratch with like CI/CD and so on. And I notice that customers tend to have way too much UI automation and not enough holistic level testing strategy in place. They only focus on basically, black box automated testing. What has been your experience in this area?
I think you're right. A lot of times people want to focus on the on UI functional type stuff, right? Like, does this look good? Does it move this way? Where, yeah, for me, for like automation, especially because I've been in places where there's already. I worked at a startup once where I got there and they had, I would say, 10,000 automated test cases, like
Automated
literally, like,
browser tests?
yeah, 10,000 browser tests. It was a combination of browser and like some API testing and stuff, but it was like a huge, massive amount. But so that's what they're saying. Hey, yeah, we have all these tests, and then you look at them, and it's like every click was a test case. We do this and we do that and we do this, but they had all this stuff, and in the end, it took that. For me, it's like, is it providing value, right? So you have 10,000 tests, right? Okay, number one, it's super hard to keep track of 10,000 tests and and have like a coverage matrix, like what are we covering in all these tests, right? So number two, is it effective, right? Because this 10,000 case test suite, if it's not like API, you're talking hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How long did that take to execute?
Yeah, it was an insane amount of time. It was like a week, like, because it was on a single thread.
Oh my
Who,
goodness.
which was, I don't want to get in, but it was just, to me, it's like, yeah, oh, you get there and they're like, okay, how long does it take to run our automation? Like, yeah, let's rock and roll. Let's see what's going on. It's like, well, we have, close to 10 to 12,000 test cases. It takes us like, or when we were doing, they were doing like planning and stuff. And they're like, okay, so we're going to factor in 2 weeks for automated regression. I was like, ho, ho, ho. Hey, stop. Oh, what are you talking about? You're gonna be 2 weeks for? Are you talking about for writing automated regressions? Like, no, no, 2 weeks to run it. And it turns out it was like being run on one laptop on one thread.
Uh,
And so it's like was yeah, it's good. Like for a stake, if I tell a COO or a CTO, hey, we got 10,000 test cases, man. We're rocking and rolling. We got all this coverage. And you can show them numbers and things like that. But in the end, is it really effective? Is that really helping you out? Is that moving the needle? Right? So like for automated coverage, like you want to make sure that you're covering at least the basis, right? That you have your integration testing, like your API is super tested, because that kind of mitigates it cuts down on the amount of functional testing or UI testing that you need, right? If you know that all the back end stuff is working, your showstoppers are going to be fewer and far between, right? So you have a good, super stable suite, depending upon what you're doing, right? Like, let's say I worked at places where we have millions on millions on millions, like hundreds of millions of subscribers, right? Where we wanted to make sure that things were working and functioning, because one service goes down and that's it, right? It's not one person that finds it, right? It's like the bigger your reach, the more visible your fumbles are. So, we would API test like that. You can run them every hour on the hour and have them kind of like the same way how our logging for a server works. You can just have it dump in alerts if a service is down. You can have it like alert you, not just like a service, but if things aren't like, also having like the all the integrations, how they're all working together, like in functional flows. It's really important to have those. But like doing as much of the testing on this side, on the other side of the box, on the other side of the black box, doing your white box, your gray box, having that a really good rich suite there, avoid you having to, because I'm really not a fan of having, I mean, it's good. Like if I'm in a giant company and I want to, tell the ETL, the executive leadership team, hey, we have 80% test coverage, 10,000 test cases executed per day. And that sounds really nice, but it's just, I'm not a fan of that, because in the end, if there's something that happens, let's say, for example, for native app development, I had built up a suite of automation tests, right? And I think at the time Apple was using like UI Automator or something like that, like they're under their automation framework. So all of my stuff, all the code was using, these locators. And then when they switched over to XEUI test, killed everything. So it's like a huge, and these systematic these changes that affect the entire operating system, like they can come whenever they want. So it's like, for me, it's really not effective unless you have a massively big shop to have, thousands on thousands of test cases. I say you have really good smoke tests, right? You have all of your backend, your API, your integration, all that stuff. And then you have, for functional UI testing, let's do all the happy path. And then as things happen in production, right? Let's say in production, all of a sudden this field is not showing up because this value is not there. Okay, rock and roll. Let's add that into the regression test suite, and then move forward. And you kind of like refine it as you go. And as the product matures, so does the automation test suite. But it should really, don't want to, like, for tracking sake, you don't want to have a huge amount, a huge amount of automated tests. You just want to have a wide spread of coverage, right?
yeah, yeah. I can say that from my last years of doing automation and working with customers and just like trying to implement good practices at different kinds of organizations, I don't think I've seen a need to have more than like, I don't know, a few dozen browser automated tests. If you have like, and it's hard to put a number on it, but what I'm trying to say here is I don't think there's a need to have a lot of automated browser tests in general in today's day and age. Like if you, for example, have a web application, you can have some unit tests, which some leaders argue whether they're even necessary or not anymore. Like for example, Kent Dodds, he's a huge proponent of integration tests, but browser-based integration tests, right? So checking the components in the UI to make sure that they work, so you can test them all in isolation, like unit tests, and you can have a lot of those tests, and they can run really fast in milliseconds as well, but still rendering in the browser. If you have APIs, you can test those as well. And so now you've pretty much got the majority of the application covered outside of just rendering the entire app, maybe checking that it looks visually good on web and mobile, maybe, as you mentioned, navigating through a few case scenarios. And to me, it's like, what else do you need from the browser outside of that? Like everything else has been tested through component tests. Well, not everything, but a good amount that you think is important. So
Uh-huh.
those are my thoughts. And so, like, yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't coded a huge browser-based automation suite in a really long time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's good. It also kind of depends, right, on what you're doing. Let's say, so for example, Salesforce. With Salesforce, a lot of it prides itself kind of like on the configurability. It's super flexible and you can configure all these things. There, I think browser testing is a little bit more important because everything, it's not like a traditional web-based application, right? So because let's say you have a component, like they have, depending upon what version of test case, like health cloud or commerce cloud, whatever cloud you're using, right? Let's say they have the concept of a lead, right? In the lead, there are all these components that work under the lead, but they can all be configured separately. And let's say I have a component that uses or feeds into the lead. I can change it and update it and make it look all nice or whatever. And then whenever they're working together, they can completely be separate on what they're supposed to be doing. And there's like no tie-in into the two. So the only way you really want to check that out is through that web-based or the browser type testing, because I mean there's so many things that you could, let's say you have an account, right? Like, because the way Salesforce, they always have leads that turn into, or opportunities that turns into leads that are converted into accounts and things like that. So like a lead and account, although they're like very closely the same, it's all the same fields and same data. They do not like if I update the lead here, unless there's a flow in the middle that updates the account after the lead's been converted, it stays that way, right? So you really have to have some type of way to check that. And there you can add in like component tests, API tests, and unit tests, and all that stuff. But there's, because of how highly configurable it is, it's very, you kind of really do. And even then, it's not like that you want to have thousands of tests. It's just that you want to at least have the ones that are the most customer facing. I like to call them like minimum acceptance, where they're all the UI stuff that you're testing through automation is stuff that 100% affects the customers, that they can see it. And uh, I'm sorry, I have puppies, and my puppies are screaming.
You wanna?
My dog just had no, they're good. They're just playing around. But
That's cool. Your dog just has some puppies.
yeah,
Super cool. How many?
she had four, and
Oh,
then
wow,
like one of them didn't make it, and then so now she has three, but like they're like little balls of craziness.
so cute. Do you want to show them on camera?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
You want
love
to
to.
give me a?
I'd love to. Everybody loves puppies.
Yeah. These are, so this is like a breed. It's called like Frenchton. So it's like
French.
half French bulldog and half Boston Terrier.
Oh,
So look at these little guys.
oh my gosh, so cute.
You see
Oh,
this?
what a cutie. How old is boy or girl?
This is a girl. She's
How old is?
she's like I want to say almost a month old.
Oh my gosh, so
But yeah,
cute.
so she's like a little.
What a cutie.
They're
And
crazy.
so I'm guessing the mom is feeding them herself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the moms. Well, we're starting to like integrate like the mush, where they eat mush. Oh, look at this guy. This guy's super cute. Or this one. Look at this one. This is the biggest. This is the girl. This is the biggest one. Like, check this one out. So big.
Wow, for 4 weeks? Yeah,
Yeah. No,
big.
is it four? Is it 4 or 5? How old are they? Yeah, 4 weeks. Yeah, look at that.
It's like big and chunky like an actual baby, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
they're mad.
cute.
They just learned how to bark. And then so like in every litter there's like a runt. And this is like the lit. So the mom, she's a runt. That she had to have a C-section because she's like super small. So this is the runt. This is the smallest one.
Poor baby, no one's giving him milk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. He's very small and not
They're starting to learn how to fight. So they're like running. That's why they're like yelling. Like, but it's crazy because it sounds like a person, like a girl yelling. It's like
really?
because like Frenchies, like they have this thing where they don't really bark. They kind of like whine and yell.
Uh-huh.
So it's not real barking. It's just like them screaming.
That's so funny. That's so cute. And are you guys gonna keep them?
No, well, we're gonna keep one. My daughter had she it's so my son has one, the female, and my daughter has the male. And my daughter's really attached to the male. And she says, "Well, if Rocky dies, then I'm not gonna have anything left of Rocky." So she wanted to have like a puppy from him, from her dog. So that's why she's the one that paid for like we the C-section. I paid less to have my son born than these dogs. So these like so, because it was like an emergency because
Yeah.
our vet said like, oh, she can have the puppies naturally, it should be good, but then it turns out that they were just way too big and she was
Uh,
too small, so we
how
had
did
to,
you guys know they were way too big?
because she was in labor for like 8 hours and nothing
Wow.
came out.
In your house?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it wasn't, there was, I can't go graphic on it, but there was some crazy stuff happening, but yeah, no, things were coming out, but it wasn't babies. So we had to take
Wow.
her to the emergency room, and then they did the C-section like right there, and then we had to like resuscitate the dogs. When they come out, so you have to like kind of like rub them around until they start to yell. So, but yeah, it was crazy experience because like I grew up in a ranch rural area. Like for me, it's foreign to have dogs inside. Our dogs were always outside, like, because I'm like super old, right? So, but it was like you were considered a weirdo if you had a dog inside it. And our dogs, they would have puppies and they would just show up with the doorstep. Hey, look, you got 8 puppies. So like me having to pay for dogs being born, that's something else, man. I did not know that was coming.
It's an interesting experience, huh? Now it's like extra children in your life that you have to pay for.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the good thing is we're gonna sell two of them and then she'll keep one.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, that's super cool and super cool experience. Yeah, I've never seen or experienced puppies born. I have a dog. Her name is Mia, but she's spaded because when we had her, like she had her periods and stuff, and that was a pain because she would
Yeah.
be like bleeding all over the house, and we had like white floors, and there'd be these little drops of blood all over the house. And
Yep.
so,
Yep.
beginning we were putting her in diapers, but then she would of course take them off, and so then getting her spayed was amazing. I guess it's good to prevent cancer, but also I was good to stop her period so that she can live a
Yeah.
normal life in our
Yeah,
house.
we had that same thing with the mother here, and that's why like after they were born, like when they were doing the C-section, I was like, you can go ahead and take everything out. That's not gonna happen again.
Yeah.
I'm not going through all this stuff because
Uh,
we same thing. I have white couches. And she would be running around and there's just like little drops. And then I don't know. I think the dog diapers are just really, that's a scam. Ain't no dog gonna keep that diaper on. Like, it's gonna take it off immediately. That's a scam. Like you get them knowing it's that you're not gonna use them.
You know what we did? We put on the diapers and then we had dog pajamas that you put on top because the dog pajamas covered the whole body. And so then she couldn't take them off. But then also it was like a pain to have her go to the bathroom because you have to then take everything off, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, this Texas, man, it's like it gets 150 degrees outside, man. Like I would never, I don't like to put clothes on. It's so hot here. Like in the summer,
Yeah.
the summers will get so hot. You kind of don't. It's almost like a winter. Like you don't want to go outside. Like, oh no, it's too hot to go outside. I mean,
Really?
because it gets so hot. Like here in Austin, it gets so incredibly hot. It's
Huh.
just you're like, really? The heat is kind of it's different, right? Because like I've been to places, like I've been to like like overseas, like to Iraq and all these places like deserts like Kuwait and things like that, and the heat, it was, I mean, it's searingly hot, but it's not the same. It's like I think it's a little bit more humidity here. because like here, whenever it says, oh, it's 100 degrees, but feels like, because the humidity is so high, it says 100 degrees, but feels like 110, right? Whereas if you go like to a desert, it'll be, because there's no humidity, it's like 100 degrees, but feels like 80 or 95 or whatever. It's the humidity has like a lot to do with it here, but yeah, it's crazy. I prefer. I mean, I like it when it's hot and everything, but yeah, it got so hot, like we couldn't even like. I remember, like, everybody has like a dream, oh, I'm gonna put in a swimming pool, especially because of COVID. Like when COVID happened, everybody wanted a pool, and I just had the extreme misfortune to try to buy a house during COVID, and a house with a pool, because everybody was locked in, was like the biggest thing ever here in Texas. So they went like immediately, like they were selling in minutes. Like one realtor actually said I would have to put an offer in writing before I could see the house. That's how like
That's
they
crazy.
were. Yeah, that's how in demand it was. Um, it became like this huge deal. So then, whenever I finally did put a pool in, it was so hot. Like we had to, you kind of had to put like, and I don't even know why I put a heater, like a pool heater, like to so it could be heated. It was completely unnecessary because like the water temperature, like on any given day in the summer, would be like 98 degrees. It was like always like a tepid pool.
Yeah,
You're like, I'm gonna cool off, and then you jump in, and it's just like a
more like a
bath.
large hot tub.
Yeah, yeah,
That's funny. Yeah, wow. So maybe have you ever been to Arizona? I feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
I Arizona has a dry heat, at least where I've been. Where was I? I want to say not Phoenix. I think I was in. I don't remember, but it was like a dry heat, and I remember I was there in the summer, and I think it was like 100 degrees or around there, and I came outside and it was hot. I just felt, but I felt like I was in an oven baking versus
Uh-huh.
here, like in Miami in the summer, it could be 90, but because of the humidity, you come out and I'm sweating within like 5 minutes just because
Yeah.
it's so humid.
And then like the breeze, right? Like it's probably like you get like a nice breeze and things like that. So it kind of helped. But like I've been in places where, like in Kuwait, I was doing like after I got out of the military, I was doing like some contracting stuff there in Kuwait, and we were staying like in this nice area in Kuwait, and it was like up by the beach, so it's like super super cool or whatever. And but like it would be when I first got there, I was super jet lagged, so I'd get tired like at 6 p.m. I go to sleep, but then I wake up like at 2 in the morning. I had nothing to do but wait for breakfast. So I'd wake up and then I'd go down to breakfast like at 4 in the morning. I would, and we were staying like in these villas. And so the villas area was like sectioned off from the place where the hotel was. So, we'd shower up and then go down to breakfast. And then we'd go outside of the villa, and there was like probably like a 50 to 100 foot walkway outside to go into the place where the breakfast was. And as soon as you walk outside, automatically like instantly drenched. Like it felt like you had not done anything with the shower. You
What?
were already like, it was so humid because at like 4 in the morning it was already like well over 100 degrees, but you're by the beach, so it was like super humid all the time. And so we had to wait until like when it was daytime, then it kind of got a little bit better. But yeah, man, it sounded great. Oh yeah, we're gonna be right on the ocean,
Yeah.
and Kuwait's like, no, it wasn't that cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. I had no idea that it's that humid over there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it kind of like depends where you are. We were in this area. I think it's called Fahil, where it's like all the they have. That's where like a lot of people they go to, like to vacation there, and especially like we were staying in a Hilton there. They had there was like a beach and like pool. It was like super, very very nice, beautiful hotel and property. It was like one of those. I would never be able to stay there like myself, just hanging out. But it was we were working, and it was for the government. That's why Doge is here. No, but it was we're spending a lot of
That's why
money
you're
on
doing
hotels.
private work now.
Yeah, that's why I'm out of all that. So, but yeah, it was a nice spot. It was just like super super crazy humid.
Yeah, crazy. Nice. Cool. Well, let's love our little tangent. Glad that
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
congrats on the puppies. Oh, all good. No, it was me. I took you into tangents because I wanted to see some puppies. I don't remember what the last topic we were talking about. Do you remember?
No, I completely was.
Doesn't matter. I have a big question for you that we started having in our pre-call discussion that I wanted to talk to you. How do you measure the ROI of automated testing?
I mean, that's good, and that's something that like
Hey,
as a
Roy, sorry, 1 second to ask you for a favor. Can you center yourself in the, yeah,
over
perfect. There you
there.
go. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I love to talk about that because that's where you really want to show that, because if you want like a buy-in from like the higher ups or whatever, and you want them to kind of like invest in, and this is for the app, right? It's not just for your department so you can get a bigger whatever, but it's for whatever products under test. Like you really need a good investment and buy-in on that automation. So being able to show what your the return on investment is super important, and that's kind of like what I was saying is like on the automation side, it's a little bit easier, right? Because we could all we would do is you can calculate how much time does it take a manual tester to run this on one browser or on one phone or whatever, right? How much time does it take them to do the same automated regression testing? How much time does it take per test? Let's say we average it out. Let's say it takes them 4 hours to do this particular test suite, right? Whereas in automation, every one of these test cases on average, let's say they run a minute, a couple minutes, depending upon what kind of test that you're running or how they're structured. That whole 4 hour test suite, you can get it done probably in what, a couple minutes, a few minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Now, that's kind of like how I like to calculate like the ROI, right? How long, how much time are we saving? But it's super important that a lot of people kind of miss it out. They'll say, okay, well, we're saving, this tester takes in 4 hours, we're doing it in 10 minutes. We're saving, X amount of time. This is how much the time for this tester costs or whatever. But that's not really it, right? Because it's not just one version of the test. Like in automation, you're running it on iOS, Android, on web, and whatever other platforms that you're doing. Whereas this tester, it's taking him 4 hours to run on one platform, on one device, on one browser, and on one operating system, right? Like, cause say you were doing Android, right? On one version or one flavor of Android, every Android phone has its own operating system flavor, right? When I was doing automation for mobile, I remember Android was all about like the candies, like, Jelly Bean. This is the Jelly Bean version and Cupcake. And so you kind of have to factor all of that in so you can really show what your return on investment of just to run the automation, right? That's one part of it, but also what is it? What are you saving? Right? Like, what is it that automation is saving you from? It's like there's those things where you could save the world 100 times. No one would ever notice until you don't. Right. The same thing with automation. And that's kind of like whenever we were talking about what I did is I really wanted to show like, how many times do we save the world? And you can, with automation, you can show that. You could show how many 100% crashes you're catching, your automation test suite catches, because that also factors into your ROI, right? How many 100% or sign up crashes or whatever anything that affects your total lifetime value or whatever value to the customers or all that stuff, right? So you could take what I did was like I went and I talked to our BAs and I had them pull all these queries like how much does it how long how much does a crash 100% crash cost us, and you have to factor in like dev time, QA time, downtime, and it's harder to do, but like goodwill, like does that cost you a 1 star or 2 star review or whatever? So you can kind of take that one out, but all these other ones are fixed costs that they're investing in, right? So you could take all of those and add them up. And I remember on one app that I was working on, I remember it was something like thousands and thousands of dollars per minute every time we weren't getting signups, because you have to think, this is what I told you, like if you have a larger audience, the bigger the fumbles are going to be, right? So if you're catching a even a manual guy, if he catches a uh, sign up error or 100% crash bug, it's not known now, but that's saving the company thousands on thousands of dollars. What I did was I pulled that all that information. I said, okay, here's what we're saving. Not just we're saving time. Yes, we're increasing the release cadence. We're cutting down the release cadence, making it faster to go to market and things like that. but also we're saving on the other side, right? Once everything is released in production, for one release, I think I measured it like over like a quarter, right? In one quarter, the automation had found like, I don't know, like 100% crashes, just be it like, let's say it was an API error or uncaught exception. These things happen like in development, right? And it's just like, that's the whole point of QA. They'll send you a build, the build doesn't work and you send it back. Super routine. But like the automation would be catching all these things, right? And it was in I just pulled any sign up bug from Jira, did queries like what are the sign up bugs that work out by automation. And it's also important as like a QA manager or automation manager that you have tagged, that it's tagged in there what was found by automation versus what was found by manual QA or whatever. So you can, it's very important to have that, to pull that data so you can show, what are we doing, is the automation providing value? Because let's say you do have all this automation and you're running it, never caught a bug. Is it really, I mean, are we really doing something? Is it, or are you focusing your efforts on automating cases that really are not relevant, right? It's the same thing. Like, say if you're marketing, if you're doing like digital market, the only reason I'm talking about this is because like I wrote a self-published, like a book, a children's book or whatever. And I'm like marketing, I'm like doing all the digital marketing. I'm showing it's like, you'll have like these keywords, right? And your keywords can catch 500 or 1,000 impressions, but no clicks. What does that mean? That means that the keywords really not hitting the right target audience. And the same thing for automation. If you have 1,000 test cases, then this thing runs, 10 times daily, has never caught a bug, in development. Okay. And you know how development is, right? Like in dev, yeah, people are throwing stuff in there all the time and it hasn't caught anything. Let's reassess our coverage and let's reassess how we're doing that. So you have all these things that you can pull out all those numbers and say, automation is saving you not just the time right now to push to production, but after production, has also saved you from 10 crashes, 5 sign up bugs, 10 whatever, primary functions that your app is doing. And each one of those, had it gone into production, would have cost you thousands on thousands of dollars of engineering time, of downtime, of goodwill from the customers, and QA time, test time, and then releasing to production again. So it's like there's like this whole cycle that has to be done. And I think a lot of times I've had QA managers that work for me, they kind of like really, and it's understandable, right? They're really focused on this. Hey, I'm doing, my guys are, yeah, are automating and I'm making test cases, instead of like kind of like zooming out and looking at the big picture. Are your tests valuable? Are they effective? Are they actually saving stuff? You know, so that's kind of like, for ROI, it's very important to show these things, because you have to be like, even on my LinkedIn, I put like a quality evangelist. You have to be an evangelist for this, because if you're not like shown, no one really knows these things unless you're kind of like putting it out there, like sending out daily updates on how's testing going, how's our automation is running. You really have to put it in their face so they understand the importance of it. Because in the end, let's say a bug happens, a show-stopping bug. The first thing that's going to be cut off because you need to get into production is going to be your testing time. Now, if all the stakeholders and decision makers understand the value and the criticalness of what you're doing, they'll be less kind of eager to cut that down. I mean, it will anyway, right? Like, it's like we got to get it out. We gotta get it. It's like, you really, they have to kind of understand where, how much it weighs on them by cutting that out.
Yeah, wow, I love that. That's one of the best descriptions of ROI measurement that I've ever heard. First of all, which book did you write? Feel free to drop it here, so that plug it in. No problem, man.
It's called Infinite Nickel Fox to Hero. It's like a kid's book, but it's like, so I during COVID, like I got I went back to school and I got my master's in leadership and change, right? And so I did all this research on leadership and how it affects people, how it affects organizations and things like that. And a lot of the research was centered because I'm a QA and development guy, was around technology and how it affects groups and people, specifically like children, because I have kids, right? So I kind of started this series to like help kids and parents talk about like the difference between like leadership and influence. Right now, there's influence everywhere. And if you ask a kid right now, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are they going to say? Vlogger, a streamer, everything having to do
Influencer.
with these things. But ask them, okay, what do they do? What value are they providing besides taking up your time, right? It's not the same. Like I would say 10, 20 years ago, you would ask, oh, astronaut, engineer, cop, FBI, whatever. These things that actually provided these people who are actually leaders, who actually stood for something. And that's kind of like why I wrote it, because I kind of want to help parents and kids talk about it early to where they understand, what is someone a leader or are they an influencer, right? So it's like a more relatable way to show them and give kids like a personal concept of leadership that they can build upon, so they can understand whenever, let's say, they decide to let their kids have phones or get them online, because that's inevitable. You can't say, I'm going to have, no, I'm going to keep them offline. And if your kid goes to school, 89.99% of the kids are already online. They're already on social media. But if you catch them early and you have the conversation of, is this person only using influence so I can buy things or so I can consume their content, but like there's no value that they're providing? Or are they a leader, like somebody who is actually stands for something, has a cause, and somebody who gathers people together to do a common thing, right? So if they understand that, they can know, okay, why am I following this guy? Because it's always, right now, man, everything, followers are as good as money, you know it's everybody has followers, but in that follower influencer thing, it's not really distinguished, like, are they a leader? There's some people who they're doing great things, right? That they're influencers, but they also have causes, and they're doing things. But there's some people that they're just there to get money, to take your views, to take your time. The guys that are doing pranks and things like that. I mean, hey, I watch it too, man. I love to, it's a good time suck for a
It's
couple minutes.
entertainment. It's
Yeah,
entertainment. Yeah.
it's entertainment, and that in itself is value. But like, for somebody growing up, you know, it's it's like, I want to help parents and kids kind of like have a discussion of why are they doing this, and why is this helpful or valuable? Like, if they can understand, yeah, it's just for fun, it's just to watch, rock and roll, move on, but don't like build your life around just wanting or seeking, uh, you know, subscribers or followers. For example, like, you could tell, like, when I was younger, I looked up to uh people in the military. Like, I was like, man, this guy, because my heroes when I was younger was like Rocky, Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger. There was a movie called Commando, Chuck Norris, Delta Force. So I would watch all these movies, and I was like, man, this guy. And I'd see, when I was growing up, I was like in fifth grade when like the first Desert Storm happened or whatever. And my teacher, she had a friend who was a soldier, and he would send us money from Iraq. Right. And I was so amazed by it. And I was like amazed by him when he came to visit. I was like, wow, he does all the cool things in the movies. So that's kind of like why I joined the military, because I was like, super impressed by him, right? But then you fast forward now, I have a son, he has friends and stuff, and I'll be sitting there, and I'm talking. So for my son, I get it. He hears all my stories all the time, and he's like, yeah, yeah, I get it. But like, you'll tell these people, and like nothing, like, I'll be talking about it, and they'll sometimes, like, one of his friends ask me, hey, so what was it like over there? And I tell him all this crazy stuff, and he's like, oh, that's cool. But then my daughter, she has a friend who's an influencer, and she has, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, right? And my daughter mentioned something about her, and they were super impressed. And whoa, wow, she's got this man. And I was like, man, I'm talking about helicopters coming
Yeah.
down and all
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
crazy stuff happening. It's like all these cool things, and like, it was just like, what really impresses people is like, oh, how big is their following, versus like how having a big following is great, but like, what are you doing with it?
What are
That's
you
all.
doing with it? What are you
So
doing with
it's
your
like,
voice?
yeah, yeah. So I kind of want to help parents because you don't really talk. So me growing, like, as my kids were growing up, I was really kind of like, I really wanted my daughter to, because it took a lot for me to be a leader. When I was younger, I was kind of like, I wasn't shy, but I really, I didn't want to like speak up against things, or like, kind of like I didn't want to shake the, rock the boat, because most kids, most adolescent boys, they don't want to make a wave. They just want to fit into the group, right? So when my daughter was, I have a daughter, she's 21, and then my son is 15. But when my daughter was growing up, I really wanted to make sure that all the things that I lacked when I was growing up, like, uh, now really good at public speaking, right? Because I've done all this stuff, and actually the we can go into this about later, but that's super important to be able to tell a good story. Very, like, if you want to move ahead in your career and like go up in the ranks, telling a great story is of utmost importance. But when I was younger, I didn't have that, and I really wanted to stress that my daughter do that. uh as she was growing up, like, I made sure, like, she talked at every one of her commencements, like at her elementary, her middle school, and her graduation. Like, she spoke in every one of them, so she's never been shy about that stuff. But also, because I wanted her to be like a really good leader, I made sure that she kind of like understood, like, it's you don't have to like do everything that everybody else does. You have to do your own thing. And if it's good, other people will like and come with you. Right. And the same thing for my son. My daughter and my son are super different personalities, but they're both kind of have those same things where I really stress that they talk, that they speak, and that they're able to tell really good stories. They also, I have like I have like long drawn out conversations with them, kind of like how we're doing now, to make sure that they're able to articulate what they're thinking, what they think is right and wrong and things. So I'll ask them about stuff that's going on right now, and making sure that they're able to talk to adults, because I think that's very important for kids, that they're able to like be good people, like that like an adult wants to kind of like has no problem interacting with them, because you see some kids, like some of his friends, they'll like look down and kind of mumble when they talk. Well, me, I have a lot to offer, like, as an adult, as a parent, and I have less, kind of like, I don't want to like pull him out because he's shy or whatever, but like his friends that talk a lot, that are confident, stuff like that, I can offer them more, and I can, interact with them more. So I think I think Jordan Peterson said something like that, is that you have to make your kids likable, because adults will give the best of themselves to the kid and help kind of like raise them up. And that's kind of the same principle that I took to make my kids, very likable, to where, and like this book series, like, the first book is out now, and then like I'm already finishing the second one, but it's kind of a leadership, like kids leadership series, to help them build up the tools. And you don't have to be super outgoing. It's even for shy kids, because you don't have to be the loudest person to kind of like lead yourself, right? Because the first thing in leadership is like leaders lead themselves first, right? But that's kind of like my philosophy. But yeah, that's kind of like the whole thing
That's
about all
beautiful, Roy.
that book
You
stuff.
never mentioned the name of the book. What's the name of the book?
It's called Infinite Nickel.
Infinite Nickel. Okay, beautiful.
Yeah,
I can find it on Amazon, I'm assuming.
yeah, Amazon, wherever
Perfect.
books are sold.
I'll
Yeah,
find the link and I'll drop it in the description for sure, and we'll pop it up on the screen. Thank you for sharing that. And
awesome.
one other thing I wanted to say, man, is that you are an impressive dude, super sharp in your career. Like, like I'm talking to you and we're having very in-depth conversations. I'm learning a lot from you, which after my, 16-year career in 16, 17-year career in automated testing, in testing in general, like, it's amazing that I'm still able to learn stuff from many other people, but I'm learning a lot from you. And then you're also like thinking about your kids and how to make them leaders and how to make them more effective in today's society. That's what, and also you come from like a military background, so it's like you're a really good dude, man. I applaud you
No,
for that.
man. No, I appreciate it, but you know what? I applaud you too, because how you said that you're learning at this stage, and I think that's super important, man. I think that's one of the best things that a person can do, is be an infinite learner, is always, because a lot of times, and I'm sure 100% that you work with people, like, that's how we do it. That's
Yeah,
how it's done.
yeah,
And it's like, this is what I would tell, like, if, let's say I have a QA guy, he's just fresh off the boat or whatever, I'm like, I always tell them this: empty your cup every day. And what I mean by that is like I saw it was like in a movie back in the 80s, and it was, Bruce Lee. This guy was playing Bruce Lee, and he said he had a cup of water, and it was like he goes, "This is all the stuff that you know." He goes, "This is stuff I want to teach you," and he poured it in there, and everything came out. And it's super important, especially for QA, that like a QA guy, as he works in something, he'll just learn the app and he'll learn everything. And they have the danger of just having that cup full. So whenever the entire app is redesigned, whenever everything a change comes in, when they pour that change in, everything comes spilling out, and they have a tendency to lose things. So every day that you work, act as if you don't know anything, and that you can learn everything. Because the same thing, like I learned stuff from you the same way that you learn stuff from me. And I think that shows a really good QA mindset, like for real. Because if you're open to learning every day and learning new things every day, I think that's going to make you super valuable. Like you can get somebody who's really good at coding, or who's really good at mapping requirements and stuff, but are they really good at learning? Because also with you have to become really really in depth, have really in-depth knowledge of something that just came out, that someone just wrote. So it's very important that you are open to learning, man. And I love that. Even after many, many, many years of working, that you're still like, yeah, I'm still learning. And that's good, because it shows that you're humble. And that's one thing, is to stay humble as a leader is super important, because it's very people have the tendency, once they, and I've worked with people like this too, that once they get up there, we're like, I don't have to do that. I don't need to know that. And oh yeah, it's disheartening when somebody that falls into that trap. And it's not, it's just like human nature, right? Like you're just like, oh, I've been doing this for, and even me, like I've done that before. Oh, I've been doing this for this amount of time. I know how it works. And if you're not humble, you will be humbled, right? So it's better just to start off that way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agreed. Yeah. One thing that like I realized as I grow and age in my life is the more people that I talk to, the more I realize that I don't know. There's that I don't remember if it was like Aristotle or so one of those said like the more I learn, the more I realize that I don't know. Right. And it's like that's been me is if I just open my mind and just listen to people, even people just starting out fresh in their career, there's always something that you can learn from someone, even a story about a bug they encountered or a broken release process. You can pick something up from that and apply it to your life. And so I totally agree with you. I think it's a very important skill in technology, 100%, because technology is evolving so rapidly. But in life in general, I think it's a very important skill to take on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's important to do that, like especially like me, I try so I'll give you kind of like this thing. Like I remember a long time ago, I was working at a place where it was just like me and another guy, and we were both kind of like inundated with all this type of QA. But then we kind of like made it through the storm, and then we started to scale up the organization. And as we were scaling up, I was thinking like, how can we make it to where we're always testing. Or that we're catching things all the time. And I remember I went on a vacation to we were like in Costa Rica, and we went on this tour, and this guy was showing us like all the wildlife, and he was telling us about leafcutter ants. And in leafcutter ants, he was like, see, they're kind of like big red ants or whatever, and they're super strong, right? Cut up these leaves, and they make these kind of like nest out of all these green leaves that they find. And so I was watching, I was like, oh, that's super cool. And it's kind of like an assembly line. They'd go pick up stuff, cut it, and bring it. And then one of them, or a lot of them, had another smaller ant on top of the leaf piece that they had cut. And I was like, what's that? He's like, oh, that's I think it was called a maiden or midgeon ant. And I was like, what's that? What's it doing? Is it like just catching a free ride? He's like, oh no, that ant is inspecting the leaf as he's taking it back to the pile. And because sometimes they'll cut a leaf from a tree or a plant that has a fungus on it, and it would kill the entire
Wow.
nest. So the leaf cutter ants have little QA ants that they'll test. They'll look and they'll inspect the entire leaf
Uh,
while they're taking it back. And then that's kind of like where I was like, that's so awesome, man. Like how nature has its own QA. So I kind of like implemented like kind of like myself and like my mentor, he was like, let's do something like continuous QA. Like we don't have to wait until it's on the other side, until it's in there and doing stuff. Let's test while it's being moved to the next phase, right? So like that's why like I always say all the infinite stuff, like infinite nickel and stuff. So, yeah, I kind of like learn from like just looking at these leaf cutter ants. But yeah, I thought it was so interesting. I was like, wow, they've got like this little ant just walking on top of the
Even
leaf.
ants have a continuous integration process, continuous
Yeah.
integration and continuous testing
Exactly.
process.
And
I love
and they're the most efficient, right? Like, I mean, even in programming, like the ant, what's it called? Ant colony algorithm or whatever. So it's like how like a worker does one thing and then it does, that worker does another thing. So it's like even in programming, like everybody, we're looking to like ants and stuff. Like ants are super. So whenever as my organization got bigger, I used the ant as my mascot. Like
nice.
because
All right.
at that organization, it was a big company. And I had a huge team or whatever. So like I would brand my team, the automation team and at
Automation
that
ants.
time yeah. So it was an automation ant. So I had like
Nice.
stickers made
That's
of
cute. Super cute, man.
our automation section with the ant on it. And all my guys, I'd send them out to all my guys and they'd have it on their laptops. So
I love that. Super cool. Roy, man, I had like 10 to 12 questions planned for this interview. I asked you two out of those because we got into so many cool discussions. Oh, look at
yeah, man.
the Apple doing its thing. No, that was a really, really good discussion. It sucks. I got another meeting in a little bit, so I gotta
Yeah, yeah,
jump
no
off.
worries. 100%.
Give me what's some fantastic advice that you've received in your life?
Fantastic advice.
Yeah, well, maybe one piece of advice you can leave us all with to be a little wiser and a little better.
I always think that I used to everything I when I was growing up I watched TV a lot, man. So I remember there was this one show and in the end it's like what's some great advice for me? And I think it's super cool. It's called keep the advice was keep your area clean. And that just it doesn't mean like I'm not talking about like your desk area or whatever. I think it's really important like so you can have a focus on like real focus on what is really important is by moving out all the things that get in the way that keep you from kind of like progressing forward like so keep your area clean, keep yourself from mining these little dirty things, these little things that really don't matter. Somebody cuts you off or some guys promoted over you. So, like all these things is just keep your area clean from that stuff. Like don't let yourself be kind of like burdened or held down by these extra things and just keep your eye on what you're on the person that you want to be like moving forward, right? Always keep your eye on where you're going, right? And if you keep your area clean by like not holding on to these things, then I think you're able to like move and progress a lot faster.
Beautiful.
So
I love
keep your
that.
area clean.
Keep your area clean. Don't focus on the minutia. Focus on your goal. Right. Cool. Well,
Exactly.
Roy, thank you so, so much for joining the Ultimate QA podcast. It's been such a pleasure. Been bookmarking so many moments in our conversation. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your day and weekend and take care.
Oh, likewise, man. I appreciate you having me on, man.